This is, for CBRE, a very important piece of research. It's a paper which is now in its 7th year of production. And essentially what we do is talk to retailers who are operational outside of their country of origin. This year, what that means is that we've spoken to 334 retailers, and they represent a footprint across 61 countries and just under 190 different cities across the world. What we're trying to establish is where are the next hotspots for retailing, and where are the cities, the markets which are most penetrated and therefore most important to the retail brands globally. And the survey this year shows that the increase in the footprint goes up slightly, just below 2%, but the city by city penetration has gone up markedly by 26%. And what we conclude from that is that international retailing and diversification of locations continues to be important, but the people moving the market are those people who are already overseas. What the retailers tell us is that Dubai, in terms of the total exposure of their brands, is the second most important location globally after London. And they continue to look at Dubai and the UAE in particular as an important expansion location going forward. But number two, it's increased its market share above the average increase in overall figures, but still stays in second position behind London. Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the UAE as a whole, has an interesting advantage in terms of the way it uses space and the way it develops new opportunities. And what we see from that is that the developers, particularly who provide the retail space to the country in both principal locations, are very bold. And so we see at the moment Majid Al Futtaim, who's responsible in particular for Mall of the Emirates, and Amar, who's responsible for Dubai Mall, both implementing plans for significant expansion of their two centres. They each have a waiting list of new retailers who want to trade within those locations, and they're taking the plunge and building speculatively new centres. And we see them also planning for expansion elsewhere, different types of retailing location. So what we have here, particularly in Dubai, is an opportunity for the developers to grow their footprint strongly. And perhaps the most interesting aspect of this report from a UAE perspective is that Abu Dhabi is doing the same thing. It delivered quite a lot of space, more than Dubai last year, but its pipeline of new space is very significant indeed. And quite a lot of that space is being developed speculatively. So we see Abu Dhabi catching up, but the overall primary impression we're given is that the developers of retail space here are pretty bold. It's a very important point. They're very different retailing locations. Dubai, over the last few years, has developed itself into a very regional retail centre. Abu Dhabi has been more parochial, but Abu Dhabi has had the advantage of delivering much more retail stock over the last couple of years, particularly last year, when it delivered about 5 times the level of stock that came into the Dubai market. And we see it coming as number 4, in particular because of one new shopping location called the Galleria, which attracted over 40 new brands into Abu Dhabi who haven't been trading there before. Abu Dhabi going forward is going to be very important, not just in comparison with Dubai, but globally, because it has about 750,000 square meters of new accommodation under construction, which is going to come into the market over the next 3 or 4 years. So as a retailing location, not just regionally, but globally, it's going to be an important player going forward. One of the interesting aspects, not necessarily covered by this report, but what we understand by talking to the international retailers who are already here, is how they're going to evolve their offering over the next few years. And what we see is several retailers looking for different areas of exposure, and I mean that by geography and by the shoppers. And what we begin to see is some of those international retailers looking for new locations within the city, not just concentration on the mall locations, but going to some community centres or taking opportunities to develop areas which are adjacent to important office and commercial centres here, for instance. So I think not only are we going to see an increase in the number of internationals who are here, but we're going to see a significant increase in the footprint of retailers who are here at the moment into different locations going forward. I think one of the other interesting opportunities that Dubai and Abu Dhabi in particular offer, and it's been picked up by retailers already, is their growth in visitor numbers. And in particular, if you analyze the visitor numbers at the moment, the length of time that those visitors use, Emirates and Dubai airports are very important as a transit hub. But we see an increase in the average number of days that visitors here using those services spend in country. So it's not just an increase in the visitor numbers, which is going to be important, it's an increase in the length of time people spend in the Emirates going forward. The government is aware of this, and there are some schemes to develop attractions which keep people here for a longer period than they already spend in the country. And therefore we expect that the average spend per person who comes here to use the retail centres is likely to go up significantly over the next few years. And that, I think, is an advantage that some of the other people within the top 10 countries won't have. It's very interesting, and I think it shows an opportunity for the landlords here and the people who are scouting for new retailers, the stables of brands here, where their target market should be. At the moment, the statistics show us that Dubai is the most important location for European retailers outside of their own region, and also for Asia-Pac retailers, those who travel. For the US, though, it's only number 2 after Europe. So the opportunity for Dubai and Abu Dhabi to grow appears to be at the moment primarily amongst American retailers. So as the US retailers in particular come overseas, there's an opportunity to increase beyond other regions their exposure to the local markets here. If you dig down into the figures for who's expanding, who's here, where the opportunities lie, then a key component of the marketplace that's been recognized over the last 12 months or so, both in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, is food and beverage. And we see, for instance, a lot of American brands coming into this market with which people who are resident here, both nationals and expats, immediately being used on a regular basis. So in other words, there's no lead-in period to their developing in this local marketplace. What we see in Abu Dhabi, though, is a slightly different picture in that with the development, especially of one location, the Galleria, we see the emergence of new high-end or luxury brands coming into that market for the first time, and we expect to see more of that. In terms of city, the number 1 location last year was Paris, and that's a reflection of the way that the Parisian market works. It's home to a lot of very high-quality French brands, but the international penetration was much less, so it's becoming an internationalized market. If I may, I'll go back to why Dubai continues to be important, because not only is it number 1 in terms of the actual penetration at the moment, but it's still a top 20 location in terms of target going forward. That's because people see that the growth in visitor numbers, the growth in the airlines providing new shoppers here is very important. And there's a direct correlation between visitor numbers, the busyness of the airports here, and we have the added advantage of a high level of spending per visitor here. So we think that the UAE, particularly with Abu Dhabi and Dubai both firing on all cylinders at the moment, is going to be very important as a location for new retailers going forward.